And I kept looking up, and this cute guy was looking at me, and he'd hide behind his book, his paperback. And then he'd kind of look up again, he'd hide again. And I kept seeing him, thinking, like, well, someone's got to break the ice here. And at that point, he's kind of hiding so much in the book, I realized it has to be me.
This week, we are talking about Love, love. And I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking to yourself, what the hell have you got to say about love, Kay? Every time it comes up on the show, you poo-poo it. And yes, I take that. That is a very fair criticism. I generally am more interested in those fiery, passionate, fleeting moments on a dance floor. But the beauty of this show is that it's a conversation podcast. And so I get to sit down and find out from other people about things and concepts and ideas that I'm really not well equipped to talk about. And who is the guest this week who is going to show me the way? Well, it is the author Neil Laird, who is currently promoting his new book, Prime Time Travelers, a satirical adventure. Neil joined me to tell me all about the time that he first met his husband at the long-gone Caribou Coffee Shop, which was found in Chicago's gay village, which is sometimes not, affectionately referred to as Boystown. And you'll be pleased to hear that I demonstrate a smidgen of growth here, like not dismissing completely the conversation about love and being like, hey, tell me more. Let me find out about this phenomenon and what it means. But before we get into the conversation, I just want to remind you that I also run a newsletter called Queer Word, which is a weekly 5-minute read in your inbox that shares a queer word, tells you what it means, and then gives you a bit of history or fun facts around it. Anyway, if that sounds like something that is of interest to you, I would love to be inside your inbox as well as your ear holes. Why not sign up through the link that I will share in the show notes for this episode. Right, this is Lost Spaces, the podcast that is all about lost queer spaces and the memories and the lessons that they bring. And let's get into the conversation with Neil. So where do you want to start? Actually, I've just asked you where you want to start, but I'm going to decide for you, sorry. The 90s, because that's where we should start, really, in most conversations, right?
That's a place. I was there. I remember it well, yes.
So paint me a picture of Neil in the 90s. Who is he?
I was just starting grad school, film school in Chicago. I just moved there after traveling the world. I backpacked through the world, and I fell in love with ancient history in the Middle East, and I just became enamored of particularly Egypt and Syria and Jordan.
So wait. Let me see if I've got this right. You fell in love with the ancient world, and then you thought, let me move to Chicago.
To get my master's degree so I could become a documentary filmmaker and someone would pay me to go back. I can see your question, though. I was like, that seems a bit counterintuitive, right? I love Cairo so much, I'm going to go to Chicago. Yeah, so I came back. I always thought I'd be doing narrative film. And then after the backpacking for 8 or 9 months, I fell in love with history and archaeology, and I wanted to get back there, but not have to pay for it every time. But I really love the documentary form. So I went back and got my master's degree in Chicago, Columbia College Chicago, and I was, early 20s, mid-20s, and it hadn't yet come out when I first got there. Ooh. I certainly had been playing, and I certainly was experimenting.
So playing and experimenting, by that you mean you were rubbing your genitals on...
I was going out, cool. Hooking up, precisely. And in Chicago, there's an area called Boystown, which is Halsted Street for about 7 or 8 blocks. You go back there now, and there's a dim reflection of his former self, like any other gay ghetto as it was. Here in New York, it was Christopher Street. That's all gone. But there, that was the place to go. And I remember it was the buzz of going there and recognizing that this is where I'll either get laid or I'll meet somebody and go out on a date.
And what was your preference out of those two options?
I didn't know at first. What's funny is, I mean, I'll tell the story, I guess, because you're asking the question. You clearly want to know. So I'm as white as they come, which means I can't dance and I have no rhythm or whatever. So the nightclubs were right out for me. I'm just an ox on the dance floor. So I tried all the clubs, all the bars, and I kept working my way up Halstead. At the very end, I found my place. A place called Little Jim's, and Little Jim's, it was a, I don't think it's gone. It's been gone for 20 years, but it was more of a jeans bar. It was more of a laid back bar for just, it wasn't nightclubby. It was little older dudes, but it was really more just sort of like a very normal bar. But it still was sexy with the tight jeans and leather, all that kind of stuff. But it was more laid back, and that's the one that I just felt comfortable with. So I would go in there on a Friday night, not knowing what position I was or what I was into. I certainly had done both by that point, but I hadn't picked a favorite.
Why choose? Why choose? Keep your options
Well,
open.
yeah, I'm about to.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So I'd go in there and I would, I'd lean against the bar and with my tight jeans, look around, and I guess I had a rather ample butt at the time, so all the guys that hit on me were tots.
But wait, so hang on. Are you saying that Bottom Hood chose you, not you choosing Bottom Hood? I don't know. I just made up the term Bottom Hood.
Yeah, I never heard that term because they didn't cross the pond yet.
Brand new.
Oh, I think it comes back to the adage: whoever likes me, I like them back.
Oh, but that's a problem, Neil. That's a problem.
It hasn't been a problem, sir. I've adapted nicely.
Because I think I have the same thing of being like, well, if you fancy me, I guess, yeah, cool, let's go. But I think that held me back a lot.
Yeah, it makes it sound more desperate than it is.
Are you saying I'm desperate?
Well, you making it sound rather more grim than it is. I think if you're experimenting, it's kind of like, this guy is actually into me, and as a matter of fact, he's kind of attractive too. So I think you don't know what you want to do. Certainly, I didn't know what I was interested in. It wasn't like I was exclusive, but I do think those formative years, being in a situation like that, being attracted in that way, and being desirable in that way,
led you down that path.
That opened up that world for me.
Okay, so let's cycle back a bit. We're talking about opening up your world.
I see the double entendre. It's very clear.
Yes,
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. I just had to give that pause there just to make sure it was clear. So let's go back and talk about Chicago and your first impressions of the city. Do you remember, like, you've shown up, you're going to university. Yeah. How did you respond to it?
Well, I went to undergrad school in Philadelphia first, and I hadn't come out yet, or except for a few close friends. So I was raised a Catholic kid, and all the baggage that comes with that. Lovely parents, and when I did come out, they were supportive, but I certainly was carrying that around. So I wasn't until I moved to Chicago and found myself traveling and found my sort of voice around the world that Chicago happened to be the city that, I was able to come out and able to embrace my identity and my sexuality. And thank God it was Chicago and not like Sioux Falls or some really boring place. Chicago's the third biggest city in the States, so you can get there where you can get anywhere else.
Apart from a tan, right?
Oh, tan? No, yeah, exactly. You grow a lot of big beards, and the weather was absolutely miserable, still is. So I think to me it was just that environment where I was ready for it as well. I guess you could say, when you're ready to explore your sexuality, you're ready to come out, you could do it in a small town as much as London or New York or Paris. But thank God I was in a big city because it had the bars, it had all the meeting places. I was in a film school, so I met other gay people. Back even then, it's surprising. You think it wasn't that long ago, but it was 30-odd years ago. People still were not queer positive. The term queer really hadn't been used yet. It was still very derogatory. And so people still didn't talk much about that. So that's why it even took me the year or so to come out, because even among the art community, even art school, it still wasn't that fully embraced as accepted yet. By the end of the 90s, things had changed. It was amazing how quickly things happened. But then I was still sort of tiptoeing through it. So I remember going to these bars on the weekends, not telling my friends, and it wasn't even always just for sex, it was to meet people. It wasn't like I was just chasing that. I just wanted to might need companionship too. And when you go to bars and stuff like that, invariably you're going to either get laid or the bathhouses or what. There's going to be a different situation finding someone you're going to move in with. I found.
Sometimes.
Look, I know friends who, that have been together for 30 years, they met at the bathhouse. They didn't get their names until like the 8th date.
Yeah, they still don't know. There's a marriage certificate. They've never looked at it.
It's you back there all this time.
So when you say that you had not yet come out when you first moved to Chicago, just for point of clarification, it's not that you didn't know or that you hadn't come out to yourself. It's just that you hadn't come out to other people.
Yeah, I think so. I think I knew what my interests were even before I got there. In fact, I even remember moving to Chicago in '91, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to come out straight away because I know exactly that I'm gay." But it still took another year. It was just fear,
Mm-hmm.
and the uncertainty of it, and the people that I met. I didn't have a lot of gay friends then. I'm not really attracted to the gay culture, the clubs, or the drag stuff. That was never my cup of tea. So I didn't really have that circle. So even though I knew by '91 that I was not bi, I played bi. That was my tiptoeing, I was bi for 2 years, even though I knew what I really was. I even had a girlfriend when I first got there. And she's still a good friend. But I remember one of the reasons that I finally did come out was, she was a lot of fun and we still enjoyed her company. I think sex got less fun as it got on, but I could still perform it. But then I also remember thinking she was much older than me, still is. And I was really feeling like I was cheating her. I remember part of it was like, this girl is wasting her time on me because I know it's not going to work. And part of it was sort of thinking about her and then other people saying, okay, just, bloody get off the pot already.
But so at this point, were you bisexual or were you?
I was actively, at first I was going to the bars and stuff and then hooking up, but then for a while I still had a girlfriend. Then I ended up with her and told her and she knew it and she was much more open and liberal than a lot of other people. So it was a very clean breakup. And again,
Interesting.
35 years later, I just saw her 2 weeks ago and I was in Chicago. She's still a good friend. But I think it was the honesty that I had to accept myself. Part of it was, I don't know what it's like over there in the UK, but it was religion and family. I have a wonderful family, very Catholic. My parents are very Catholic, and I was terrified what they would think. So it was easier not to tell them. If I came out here, and I think I even came out in Chicago probably a good year before I came out in Western Pennsylvania when I went home.
Yeah, and I recognize that there's a flaw in the questioning that I'm about to start questioning. Oh, I don't know where I'm going with the sentence. So I just want to put that out there. But I understand that. I understand why you wouldn't come out to your parents because of the fear of the backlash from them. But that doesn't quite explain to me why you didn't come out when you first moved to Chicago.
I don't know, and funny, it's been so long now, and I've been out for so long. I can't remember, and it wasn't that long. I'd say within 2 years I'd come out, but I think.
Yeah, but that's still a long time when you're in your early 20s and there's hormones are raging.
Yeah, exactly, and I do not remember why. It's a very good question. I think I was new, and I was meeting new people. I got sucked up into film and all the new friends, and it wasn't that of an issue. I think I was so otherwise preoccupied that maybe it receded as an immediate thing I needed to do. But I do remember when I started talking about it with certain friends, it was very easy. It became easier once I talked about it. But it's a damn good question. 35 years on, I cannot remember why it took me so bloody long to do it. Because I certainly knew by the time I touched down in Chicago what I was interested in.
Who was the first friend you told?
Well, I think a few friends already knew that I was bi even from my earlier days before I moved there. And I think I probably told them first because I was already telling them that I was, experimenting in Philadelphia where I came from before. I can't remember who the first was, but I remember telling some of my more conservative friends. Like, for example, another dear friend of mine, again, I just saw him in Turkey a few weeks ago. He's Turkish-American. He's conservative. He's not like deeply Muslim and that kind of thing, but he comes from that culture where homosexuality was just totally buried. And I remember, even though he was a cameraman, I still use him for films and we're still really close, telling him was a little bit unfortunate because I didn't want to lose him as a friend, but I didn't know what he would think. And I do remember his first reaction when I told him, sitting in that little coffee shop in downtown Chicago, was, "Oh no, are you?" Like it was a disappointment. He's later apologized for that, but his reaction was the homophobia that was there. He didn't change. He didn't walk away from me. Nothing changed in our relationship, but that reminded me that, thinking about that now, that clued me into his first reaction was how disappointing. And I didn't want that. And these are a bunch of new friends. And I do remember it's a very international school. So it was a film school, but I had a Turkish friend, an Iranian friend, a French friend, someone from Ghana. The cultural mix-up, too, you weren't exactly sure what they thought. Some of those are more conservative countries than others.
Yeah.
Certainly not France, but the others, you just don't know how they're going to react. So I think it's probably just easier to lay low until I got my bearings. That's a twisted, long answer to your question, but it's a good one because in hindsight, it's been so long, I can't remember exactly why it took me so long to do it because I certainly knew.
But like after that friend's reaction, and I know he's since apologized, I'm not picking on him. I feel like I'm giving lots of caveats to my questions today. But after that friend's reaction, which was so negative, how did you then maintain the strength to come out again and not be like, oh, maybe I just won't tell anyone ever. Maybe I'll just hide in a
No,
corner.
because he did not do anything beyond that. His disappointment was he brought his own baggage of homosexuality, which he dealt with and faced with, but he didn't get up and leave the table. He didn't throw water in my face. We didn't stop being friends. His initial reaction was that guarded reaction that so many people have who don't have the world that I did. So I kind of knew that was already there. He comes from a conservative family in Istanbul. I wasn't surprised. So in retrospect, he could have been much worse. But he was a film student, and we were good friends already. So I didn't hold it against him because I also knew that, look, we're so part of that world that it's a very natural thing. We think it, we breathe it, we know people that like that. Other people outside our circles, I have to respect that it takes them a beat to figure it out. I remember telling my brother, I'm also very close to him. He's a really great guy. He's done very well for himself, and he's married his high school sweetheart, his prom date. They're still together after 45 years. She's lovely.
Wow.
So he is conservative. He did exactly what he wanted to do. The job he wanted, he's done really well, and he's married his high school sweetheart. So he had a life all picked out for himself. And I remember he was the first person in the family I told when I was coming home to come out. And I figured, well, he's more grounded. My sister was still young and still trying to find her way. And he said on the phone, "Oh, really? Are you? Can I call you back?" And he hung up. Or said goodbye, maybe. I can't remember. He might have said goodbye. And then he called me back 15 minutes later. And he goes, "I have to tell you, I went out and I mowed the grass, which I just mowed 2 days ago. I mowed it again to think about it, and it's okay." I'm thinking, well, of course it's okay. It's not about you, it's about me. But I didn't hold it against him because it was Tom's world being shattered. It wasn't part of his steps. It wasn't part of what he chose. So he had to get his shit together and figure it out too. And 10 minutes later, he called me back, and he has been in my corner ever since. So you have to be a little generous, I think, for people to hear the news. We see it as good news. They probably see it as bad news because suddenly the trajectory and the idea they have is off kilter. Give them a beat to come around. If they don't come around, then they're not friends. In these two cases, and my friend and my brother, it's disappointing, yes, that they didn't embrace it straight away, but this was 1991 or whenever it was. They weren't part of that world, and they had to think about it for whatever reason, and then they came back, and they've never wavered. So it's just a little generosity I think you have to give to people who are not in our bubble.
Yeah, and I appreciate that on an intellectual level, but on an emotional level, I guess how do you not internalize that response and anticipate it from future interactions?
I mean, those are some of the tougher ones. I think it was easier telling my French friend or my Iranian friend who was a filmmaker and stuff because they were more open to that world. I think they're in that world. Those are two of the tougher ones that I recall. Most of them was sort of a non-event. I remember telling my high school friend who never left Western PA and his wife, and they said, "We don't care, whatever, that's great. You want to get a drink?" Someone else said, "Oh, I knew for months. I figured that out, but why didn't you tell me last year?" So I ran the gamut. It was everything. Those are two that I remember because it was like, oh, wow, you're actually saying it's okay for me to be gay to think about it. So yes, at the time it probably hurt, but it felt so freaking good to say it that eclipsed everything else.
Yeah. And my other follow-up question about your interaction with your brother is this a common way that your family processes information? Goes and mows lawns and then comes back?
I have a very conservative family. I don't mean in terms of religiously conservative or, Trumpy or anything like that.
They're conservative, but they're not Trumpy.
They're not awful. They're not, sub-mutants, right? They're good people. So I think, it is a broadside for a lot of people, and I think because it wasn't part, as I say, of that I think, yes, so I think the answer is they probably have to ruminate on things a bit before they accept them. I was the weird middle child who went off and backpacked and became a filmmaker and all that stuff. I was the loose cannon in the middle, I think, that tried those things to better or ill, depending on your perspective. So I was not afraid to leap before I look. I think they're just more cautious. So a lot of it was just them trying to suss out what they've heard.
And so, speaking of sussing out what they've heard, what happened with your parents?
I mean, we had, and this shows you how my brother and everybody rallied behind me, because they were all separated by that point. My brother was in D.C. I think my sister was, I don't know, somewhere else in Philadelphia or something. And when I told my sister as well, who was more understanding, they all came home that weekend to be with me.
Aww.
And I remember I told my mother, she picked me up at the airport, and I told her, and she grabbed my knee and told me, but she goes, okay. Everyone was worried about my dad. Everyone's worried about my dad, the patriarch, who's definitely the most conservative, and he's definitely the most sort of grounded, and, he's very patriarchal. So it was all about what Dad's going to say. So we all went home, and the whole family was there. Dad probably wondered why everybody flew in for a random weekend in September or whenever the hell it was. It wasn't Thanksgiving, suddenly everybody's there.
Am I dying?
Exactly. You got some news from the doctor you want to tell me, right? But when he told me, it's kind of funny in retrospect what he said, only because it shows you just how limited his worldview was. When I told him that I was gay, I think the family all left me to tell him. I remember sitting on the couch telling him. His first reaction was, well, you don't wear leather and all that stuff, do you? Because he obviously had this image of, like, he probably watched Cruising on TV a few days earlier or whatever.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
Because unfortunately in 1991, whenever, we didn't have the world we have now.
Well, yeah, but most people's parents are, oh, you're not going to become a drag queen, are you? But your dad was like, you're not going to, like, wear a harness.
I didn't know why he went right to, like, Cruising and that kind of thing. He must have heard something in the news or whatever. And remember, something else, too, that's important is that AIDS was raging.
Yeah.
So AIDS equaled gay, and gay equaled AIDS. So even talking about that stuff brings up this fear of not only that you're dying or you're going to die, but also you're in this decadent world where every gay man is out there in a club, in a bathhouse, in a sling, and all that stuff. And so there was a lot in the press in the late 80s about that world, because the religious right in the States was very much talking about the decadence of gay. So that stuff probably filtered into my father's worldview.
But thank goodness times have changed, and
everybody's embracing now. The religious right just loves us.
They're not banging the same drum 30 years later.
No, they're probably banging the altar boy, but I will leave that to another story. But funny, a follow-up that I remember was my father, and again, it worked out well. They're still all around. They're still very loving, and a husband, and he's part of the family. He's in every single photo. But I do remember when they finally came to Chicago a few months later to see me. I was dating somebody else at the time. But they came out. They're going to spend time with me, meet the new boyfriend, long since gone. But they didn't stay at the house because I only had one bedroom. So I put them up at like a Holiday Inn or something in the middle of Chicago. What I didn't realize was, I told my parents, I'll meet you outside of your hotel, and we'll go wander around. I'll get you some good cheesesteak or pizza or whatever you want to do. And it was the day of the Gay Pride Parade. and it went right past their hotel. It went right past, and they're waiting outside for me. So as they're waiting for me, here come the leather floats with the Leathers and the Dorothys, and they're all coming down and singing and dancing to We Are Family. And there's Dad just wide-eyed thinking, did you arrange it this way, son? I know that's what he was thinking. I was a really, really bad choice of hotels, or a bad weekend.
But you clasped hands with them and joined the parade, right?
Oh yeah, we were just partying up all night after that. We were on. My dad was in chaps. It was I don't want to go there.
Shared a bottle of poppers between the three of you.
Exactly. Yeah. Family size.
Okay, so we have gone in a direction that we shouldn't have gone in. I think that we were talking about.
Hey, I'm just answering your questions, dude. I'm just following your breadcrumbs.
I'm sorry. I need to stick to topic. We were talking about first impressions of Chicago as a city.
And now we're talking about my dad on a float.
And now we're talking about your dad huffing a bottle of poppers. Look, and so at this point you were not out, but you knew to yourself that you were not heterosexual, and so you started going out on the scene and exploring. I'm interested because you've said that it wasn't for you, like you weren't interested in dancing, you weren't interested in clubbing, you weren't interested in that culture. What were your first impressions of going out?
It wasn't great. I didn't enjoy the experience. You always think of the famous line from How Soon Is Now. So you go and you stand on your own, you leave on your own, you go home and you want to cry. It wasn't quite that bad, but I certainly remember going to the pubs a lot and then just sitting there standing in the corner, nursing a beer and going home. So it just wasn't for me. And so that's why we eventually get to the lost spaces, why I was sort of hanging out at coffee shops and things like that. Just because I guess I was even then was looking for something more meaningful. I just couldn't scream over a crowd. I wasn't dancing. Drugs are never big. I did my weed, but I was never into the recreational stuff. So it just didn't sit right for me. I just kind of felt like I wasn't part of the scene.
Oh, that's sad when you feel that way.
Yeah, I get it back. Don't you worry. Every story has a low before a high.
Well, yeah, the hero's arc, right?
Yeah.
But also, these clubs were situated in Boystown, which was this kind of mecca of gayness.
Correct.
What did it feel like being in that community?
I think it's exciting at first because obviously, once again, there is a community. And I don't know if I met any friends there. Again, I think because, I think at first I separated the two because my other friends were not gay. So I would go there on the sly on the weekends or whatever. And at first it was about sex. And I got that. And it was nice, but it wasn't something that I needed to pursue every weekend. So I wouldn't say I became disillusioned, but it became less exciting about going there because I realized it was just driven by, desire and the hedonism, which we all want. But it's not exactly what I don't think I was looking for. It wasn't like it was some romantic way to fall in love, but it was just beer and alcohol. So I don't think I didn't become part of the scene. I was never a nightclubber. I was never a bathhouse guy. I was never the drag shows. Never interested in me. Because I didn't have gay friends at that point, and also because I just didn't. It's not what I wanted to do with a Friday night.
Well, so how did you end up making gay friends?
I think once I met my boyfriend Carl at the Caribou Coffee, which you probably should get to. Then together as a, and what's funny with me is I still don't have a ton of gay friends, and it doesn't matter because it's not about the sexuality. So I have a lot of friends that all their friends are gay. Mine aren't. I'd say the minority of my friends are gay, and that's not just that I have anything against it. It's just to me, once I came out and accepted it, it didn't become that important identifier. So I have 3 or 4 gay friends today, but I'd say 90% of my friends are straight. It wasn't like it needed to be about sexuality as well. I had those friends, and some stuck and some didn't. So I guess...
But I guess it's kind of important that your husband's queer.
Well, that definitely does help, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you keep hinting that we should get on to the topic of the conversation that we're here today.
Well, only because I know the title of the
and
show.
I'm taking it as a personal affront. You're saying my interview style is terrible, so I'm going to bring it in.
You keep wandering, talking about the War of 1812 and all these weird things. It's like you got to stay focused, man.
Yeah, focus. Right. So we're here today to talk about Caribou Coffee, which was a chain of coffee shops. Oh, it still is a chain of coffee shops, but
they still around, yeah.
No longer exist in Chicago, according to the Wikipedia page. And the reason that, although this isn't specifically a queer space, the reason that we're talking about it today is because this particular branch was located in Boystown.
Correct.
So, tell me about this space. Why did you find yourself there? Please don't just answer saying you needed coffee.
Yeah, it's all about the coffee. You get 3 free coffees for every punch card.
Wow.
No, I think because at that point, this was a little later. I met my husband, future husband, in '98, I think. So I'd already been out for a couple of years by that point. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was looking for, again, something more substantial than the nightclub, hookup or whatever. But a very big thing happened. I started working in television. And a big new technology just emerged that gave me liberty, and we're talking on right now, a laptop. So suddenly one becomes mobile. You do not have to sit by a big clunky computer in your office. So I started doing what I'm doing now, writing scripts for TV, and I could do it from anywhere. So I figured, why not, go to a place. I'm going to hang out for 6 hours. Let's go to a place where I will be seen by other gay men.
Aww.
Because there was no apps, there was no Grindr. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to get out there. If you're going to hang out in a place and write, why not do it where, something else might happen while you're doing it? So Caribou Coffee was the spot. And Chicago, I remember Chicago was ass-rapingly cold for like 8 months of the year. I remember it was January. It was really freaking cold.
Did we hang out? Sorry, just Did you just use the phrase ass-rapingly cold?
I believe I did, yes.
Is this a phrase I should be familiar with? Is this something that other people say?
Maybe it's an American thing. I've heard it before, yeah. Just means
Okay,
damn
all right,
cold.
let's not labor on that because the imagery is not great. Let's move on. So, Chicago, cold, winter.
Yes. So, no matter when it was, I would get my laptop and I would go out. I remember I was in January, deep freeze, and I still slept in the snow to go to Caribou Coffee because at least I will be, out where the boys are.
Where the boys are. Aww.
Yeah, where the boys are. You want to sing the song together? Yeah. And I remember laptops had just sort of come in, and I was in the corner. And if Carl, my husband, was here, he would tell his side of the story. He claims he was walking down the street in the cold, and he looked through the window, and he saw a really good-looking guy in the corner. But he obviously was so freaking pretentious because he's on one of those newfangled machines and showing off. But he said he was cute enough where he came in and he got a coffee. And this part I know is true because he got a coffee and Caribou Coffees, they had this sort of like Alaska look or whatever. They had like a fireplace in the middle, a stone fireplace, and caribou skulls on the wall or fake ones or whatever. It kind of played like it was a lodge somewhere in Nova Scotia or something. In Chicago, that was fair, but I've seen ones in D.C. where it's 90 degrees and the fireplace does not get much need. But he sat by the fireplace, and I remember... we were typing away. It was a show about the Druids. I was doing a show about Druids, which was a very strange show I had to do. So I was definitely in some other world. And I kept looking up, and this cute guy was looking at me, and he'd hide behind his book, his paperback. Aww. And then he'd kind of look up again, he'd hide again. And I kept seeing him, thinking, like, well, someone's got to break the ice here. And at that point, he's kind of hiding so much in the book, I realized it has to be me. And luckily, what allowed me the opening line was... I'm an Egyptology nut. I love anything ancient Egypt. I'm still obsessed with it. Have been for 40 years. And he was reading a book about Egyptology by this very obscure British archaeologist named E. Wallace Budge, who died in like 1903 or something. Nobody reads this shit. Even if a thesis, you don't read this thing. And here he is reading a tattered paperback about mythology of ancient Egypt by E. Wallace Budge. So that was my in. I got up and I walked over to the fireplace and I leaned down and says, I can't help but notice you're reading Budge. And that was my opening line. And somehow that worked. And then 26 years later, we're still together.
And that's the inscription on your wedding band.
It is Budge. And I always joke, it's like if he was reading Stephen King's Cujo or something, we probably wouldn't be together today. But it was Budge.
So what happened after your... stunning opening line?
Well, you can use that line for a fee. You can have that line. It's yours. I'm not sure if it still has a cultural courtesy it did in 98, but we quickly planned. I remember I said, I'll give you a call. Did you even have mobile phones? Yes, mobile phones were around by that point.
Well, you didn't give him your pager number?
2 years earlier I might have, but I think by 98, I think the world had turned. It was still like a little flip top and all that kind of stuff. There was no texting yet. Had to go to satellite via Sri Lanka to get to him, I think. But, the message got there. And he answered on, like, the first call.
Aww.
So he's waiting for me. He said, I'm so... He still says, I can't believe you called so quick. And then we
wait. So this first interaction, there was just like a pleasantries, nice back and forth, and then you swapped numbers.
Yeah, I don't think we chatted. We didn't leave the Caribou Coffee together. We must have sat there and chatted over a cup of coffee, and I guess one of us had to go. I think I might have had to do something with the script to get back to it. I can't remember. But after a while, it was also, it's a coffee shop, and you got to get on. It was late. It was dark by that point, probably dinner time. So I figured, well, I got the number. That's all I need. And then we went on a date 2 days later.
Oh, and then ever since. Yeah,
and then I only realized then that he was so much younger than me. He's 10 years younger than me, and I didn't know that at the time. We were talking about movies, and he goes, "Did you see that movie?" "Oh, I wasn't born yet." Holy shit! Okay, are you legal? Let me do math in my head.
Hang on. If I'm doing the math, you moved to Chicago in the early 90s as 20 something. So by this time,
30. I had that wrong. I was born in 66.
Okay.
And he's 9 years younger than me, but he was 21 at the time.
So I don't need to be worried.
Because this is 98, remember? This is the end of the 90s, remember?
Yes,
Yeah, he was not 14, if that's what you're getting at.
Well, yeah, I was like, hang on.
I have to go real fast. No names.
Okay, so I want to just stay in. I do want to find out about your husband. Sorry, I'm sounding really dismissive. Ugh, love. Ugh,
Yeah, whatever, that dude.
Tony.
Yeah, we'll bring him in later, yeah.
Yeah, we'll find out about that later. Caribou
Yeah.
Coffee. So was it the kind of place where this would happen a lot of times? Like you would just strike up a conversation with someone?
I did, yeah. He wasn't the first person to check because it was a flirty place. It was a place he would flirt.
Wow.
There weren't too many places. And, Boystown, again, yet back then, this was the Grinder. This was the, all the other sites. Because unless you wanted to go to the noisy bars, there was a quiet place you could talk. So it was very flirty. So I remember giving my name or my number out to a couple other guys. I had 2 or 3 other dates there, I think. And I certainly would hit on guys and they would hit on me. But it was always just in the social openness. So it was kind of like more of a daytime hitting up rather than hooking up. That's probably why we didn't go home. It wasn't a hookup place. It was a place to meet someone, which I found much more appealing because you could sit there and talk to somebody. We talked for an hour. I remember we talked about movies a lot. I'm a huge movie nut, and so was he. And we talked about David Bowie, who has always been been a huge fan of, and he had just seen the Bowie show that I had seen. So we had a chance to converse, unlike let's go back and hook up and suss out our names later, which... It's been fun. I'm not saying I'm not dismissing that world. There's a time and a place for that too. But I do think, and I sound like the old fuddy-duddy man here, I do think that's a lovelier way to meet someone than it is now, where you put the cart before the horse. We sat there for 45 minutes.
No, I absolutely agree. I think I'm just confounded by the practicality of it, and maybe it's that the culture is different in America, or the culture was different in the 90s. But I can't imagine going to a coffee shop with my laptop and someone talking to me. Actually, maybe this is a London thing because everyone in London is miserable.
Right, yeah. I lived in London, yeah. It's a darker place, yeah. Again, this was the 90s, so I think things were a little slower. I think it was a meeting place, so it was a place where everyone knew what was going on. When you're talking to somebody, you knew you were flirting. So it wasn't like, you were just suddenly hitting somebody up someplace in a coffee shop in Soho and just hoping they're gay. So it was pretty clear what was going on, but he just moved slower. That's what he just moved slower.
But so how many guys would you hit on every day on average?
You just want to get all the dirty stuff, don't you?
No. I'm just trying to understand.
I think I certainly did it, but not every time. I think, once again, it's no different than a bar. You go and you leave on your own.
Yeah.
Sometimes guys were attracted to me, sometimes they weren't. Sometimes I would look at somebody and then look up and they're gone, or vice versa. So it was still a hit and miss kind of thing. But, what I liked about it was it took the sting out of it. It wasn't the harsh rejection of a club where you're a slave to your dick and it's all driven by what I get right now. I was writing, and it was a coffee shop, and it was an outdoor space. It was a public space.
It's like you were getting paid to flirt.
It was a sidebar thing in a way. You could do your coffee and you write, and if you hook up, that's great as well. So it wasn't a place that was driven simply by just that.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it was a wonderful venue, because we really did get a chance to talk for a while.
But how do you stay focused on your work if there's a beautiful man over there?
Well, I don't think I did much more work that day, I can tell you. I had a deadline. I was getting paid, so I had to work. But I'm sure that day no more scripting was done.
Aww. Okay, so then I guess we should talk about your husband and your relationship then.
Well, I hate to, have you roll your eyes. No, it's boring stuff. The rest is just footnotes. We stay together, and 25 years later we're still together. That's just...
Oh, okay. So that's just boring, then. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Just a boring
that's just
25
life.
years.
That's just life. Yeah.
So you went on a date in the next few days.
Mm-hmm.
Did you just know?
I did. It's very strange, but I just knew. At first I thought he was stunningly beautiful, which helped that end of it. And then when he opened his mouth, smart words came out. He just finished University of Chicago degree, Ivy League, and he had a lot to say. And I just knew, I think halfway in the conversation, oh my God, this guy exists. And he says the same thing. We knew instantly. And we were dating 2 weeks later, and he moved in that fall. Yeah, we moved like lesbians.
Well, I'm glad you said it. I was thinking it.
Yeah. My lesbian friends, if they were here, they'd say that.
And then, so what does that mean then for your interaction with the Caribou? Like when you started dating, did you stop going, or did you continue going? Were you continuing to flirt?
I did. Yeah, I would work from home. Yeah, because I got what I needed. And it's a good question, because I remember thinking, it was like, I thought I was going to write. No, I was going to get a man. And once I got my man, I didn't want to schlep across town in the snow to write. I can just do it on my laptop at home.
I'm not going to need clothes anymore. I'll just
Yeah,
stay in my
exactly.
pajamas.
No, precisely, right. The Caribou Coffee served its purpose. Turn the page.
Oh, poor Caribou Coffee. So are you the reason that it closed down then, and that it's now a lost space? Because
I didn't even know. We left Chicago. We moved to New York in what, '01 or something, and I think it was still open.
So we can't
then.
blame you.
No, can't blame me. But I don't think. Look, I think. Look, in big cities, whatever's hot now won't be hot on Tuesday. So things were closing and opening all the time. Bars were changing their name. Now, all that whole area is much more corporate. Here in New York too, it used to be Chelsea where we moved, and that was the gay area. Now it's a bunch of banks, and it's a bunch of chains. You get a Chipotle or whatever where the leather bar used to be. Then it moved to Hell's Kitchen, and Hell's Kitchen is becoming co-opted. So things move around and kind of die. And I don't know where it is in Chicago anymore because I haven't been a Chicagoan for so long.
So you just stopped going. You were just like, oh, I've locked in a man. I'm not going anymore.
I mean, it probably was simply that, and then that I think like anything else, you go to some place, you go to the gym. A lot of people go to the gym because they want to be seen, and then
and
they
then you
don't
get
go.
married, and then you stop going to the gym.
Yeah, and you get fat. Who cares? Your husband loves you anyways. So I think it's like a time and a place. As I got older, I had a stable relationship, and I didn't need it, and it wasn't
You
important.
always need coffee. What are you talking about?
Oh, I'm a coffee junkie, but I can get it across the street rather than getting on like, the red line and going 20 minutes in the biting cold.
Okay. And so you said that you were no longer living in the city when the place closed down. So you probably have no recollection of hearing about it closing or knowing that it closed. And so my assumption, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the first time you knew that this place had closed was when we were arranging to have this conversation.
I think my husband and I walked by it 5 or 6 years ago because his mother's still in Chicago. So every couple of years we go back to see Mom. And I think we were walking around the old neighborhood and we walked by and we found out. But even this was probably like, 2018 or something. So it was pretty recent.
How did you respond? How did you feel?
I think it was bittersweet, only and kind of recognizes a time and a place that meant something for us. I forget even when it's not even a coffee shop now. It's like a boutique or something really kind of twee and boring. It wasn't even gay.
Oh, boring.
So you kind of recognize time marches on, right? And it's like, thank God remember those things because you blink and everything changes. So it was more about us. It was more about just recognizing, there's where it all happened and trying to remind ourselves of stuff before we get too, old to forget this stuff completely.
And so when you think about that space and you think about yourself there with your brand new laptop, how long did the battery last, by the way, in the 90s?
Probably like 12 minutes. I think, I always sat in the corner that has a plug.
Oh, good idea. Yes. Not a rookie.
I think it was the only plug. This was in the 90s where not like every seat has them now, like when you fly an airplane where there was like one plug, and I had to get there early to get that plug. That was the spot.
that motivates you. So when you think about that person who got there early just in order to get the seat next to the plug.
Fucking wanker. Fucking asshole.
Oh, you're referring to yourself as a wanker because everyone else in the place would be.
No, the guy who got there before me. I thought you meant the guy who got there before.
No.
How dare him? How dare them get there 10 minutes before me and get the electricity?
No, when you think about yourself.
Oh, I thought you meant
And you think about yourself running to the coffee shop so you can beat that bastard who got the plug, and you can get the plug, and you can sit there all day and you can do your work. What do you think about that person?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's just youth. I mean, I'm not sure if I have any deep philosophical, way to wrap it up. I just think there was a time and a place again, and that's where I was. That was important to me in life. And I look back at it now and go, it's probably more important than I thought. Because you're in the middle of it. You don't necessarily recognize. You're not telling yourself, I must do this all the time. But I remember going there, and that was always my spot. Sometimes I got it, sometimes I didn't. And I can't remember how long the battery lasted. But it was youth. I think I look at it just somebody who was just youth, and that's where I was at the time. And you look back wistfully later and say, oh, yeah, those are the things that were important to me then.
Electricity, yeah. Well, and so if you had an opportunity to give him some advice, what would you say?
I'm not sure because it kind of worked out for me. I kind of got the electricity and the boy.
Oh, so maybe the advice is early bird gets the worm, right?
Precisely. I already knew that. Get there 10 minutes earlier before the other guy gets there, right?
If you loved this chat, then why not go and give some love to Neil on socials? And me, of course. I would like some love also. Don't give it all to Neil. I will share all of the relevant links in the show notes for this episode, but just quickly, Neil can be found on TikTok at gay_history, at Instagram at ancientgayhistory, and on his website at neillaird.com. Meanwhile, I can be found on TikTok and Instagram at lostspacespod. Right. Go and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for spending the last hour with me.